were only given many of those rights within the lifetime of some of us in this room who are perhaps not as young and youthful as all of you. Sounds familiar? Kind of a typical structure of a discussion talking about stereotypes of Muslim women. And one of the things that would typically come out of such a discussion is how proud Muslims are of the heritage that Islam gives them, and rightly so. Islam does have a lot of very positive, very forward-thinking ideas about the role of women and their interrelationship with men. And in fact, when I sat down to present this, I kind of half expected myself to give you that presentation, and it would have made my life very much easier. But I think we need to start moving our discussion a little bit further than that, because I think these two positions have become very, very entrenched. We are aware, when you switch on the TV or you open the newspapers, we are very aware, and you at university will probably be at the front line of it more than anyone else, of the kind of stereotypes that Muslim women come across, so the kind of thing that Shelina was talking about earlier, that women are fully covered, that they can't go out of the house, and the kind of things I mentioned at the beginning. But I think what we need to have in this discussion is an honesty about the fact that the counter-argument that Islam did come to bring rights for women, and that Islam was a form of liberation for a very oppressed part of its society, is perhaps not something that we cannot hand on heart say that Muslim women enjoy today. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But the challenge is that in a very polarized media debate, we have people who want to set out to demonize Islam, either willfully or through ignorance, polarizing themselves against a Muslim community that is adamant that Muslim women have rights and liberation and freedom. And somewhere in the middle of this, the Muslim women are just forgotten, as though Muslim women themselves don't have an opinion for themselves, don't have ideas about how they themselves want to live their lives, don't have experiences, ideas and suggestions. And that's why I gave my talk the title, The War Over Muslim Women. Because if there's anything that I would want all of us to leave this room with, is the idea that we need to create some space for women. And part of that is connected to men as well, because I will talk a little bit about how when we stop hearing women's voices, that's harmful to men too, in my opinion. That we need to go away and think about how we create that space. What does it mean to find out what Muslim women want, what their experiences are, and how do we start to create that kind of space? So let's think a little bit about the myths, first of all, of those who look into the Muslim community and see Muslim women. Well, the myth is that Islam oppresses Muslim women. The myth is that it's patriarchal and that it favors men. The myth, and this is a difficult one to challenge, is that the only escape for Muslim women, the only escape is to actually leave Islam. And we have very prominent examples of that in the media about women who have left Islam and declared their freedom from it. And I think there's a much more pernicious myth, a much more challenging to destroy, particularly in the kind of environment we live in, where everything is media driven and it's all about sound bites, because it's a much more sophisticated argument, is the one that says that even when Muslim women think that they're free, they're only brainwashed to think they're free. So even, for example, when Muslim women think they are freely of their own volition choosing to cover, whether that's a hijab or a dupatta or a niqab, whatever it might be, it's only because they've been brainwashed by the male hierarchy to think that. That's a very demeaning myth to put onto women, because it means that the agency, the choice, the free will, the autonomy of a Muslim woman is somehow belittled compared to any other women. And there is, of course, a discussion about, do women really want to dress in a particular fashion, whatever background they come from? How do we know what people really want is what they really want? But this seems to apply only to Muslim women, that it's only Muslim women who are intelligent enough to make that own free will decision about whether they are Muslim or not. And I would add at this point that I think this kind of attitude does exist from within the Muslim community as well. Because I think there is an idea that if a woman chooses to behave with a particular action or not, and I'm not discussing, for example, let's take the example of hijab, the merits of whether a woman should or shouldn't wear it, I'd simply point out that in the same way that we rail against the Western media for suggesting that Muslim women who choose to wear the hijab are somehow brainwashed, there is no recognition that sometimes, and as I say, I'm not making an opinion on this, there are Muslim women who choose not to cover, and again, they have made a reasoned opinion about this. And the Muslim community judges them entirely by what they wear and how they look, rather than the kind of commitment or emotion that they bring to that. So I think that's a very difficult myth to dismantle. What else do we see about Muslims? Well, Muslim women, you turn on the telly and there's a picture of a Muslim woman on a story that has nothing to do with Muslim women. There's some kind of terrorist attack that's happened, or you open the newspaper, and again, there's not even a woman anywhere within, a mile of the scene, and there she is in the newspaper. So Muslim women are constantly used as the imagery to represent Islam and Muslims. And perhaps most difficult really to deal with, particularly for Muslim women, is that whenever somebody's trying to make a dig at Islam, someone's trying to attack the Muslim world, the first thing they'll say is, but look, you oppress your Muslim women. Look how terribly backward they are. Look how far behind they are. That's always the first dig that we get about Islam. And so Muslim women become this kind of front line of the battle between this war that's going on. On the other hand, as I said, the Muslim establishment is keen to insist that Muslim women have so many rights. But my question, very simply, to have a debate is, let's go back and look at the rights that Islam brought. The kind of thing that Amina was talking about, what was the culture, what were the ideas, what were the mores that were used in that early time, and what happened to those rights? What is the actual situation for Muslim women today? And for me, this means going back to the very baseline idea of what Islam is. And for me, it's a very simple but revolutionary idea that Islam brought, which even today sounds simple, but we see can't really be implemented fully. And that's the idea that the status and worth of every single human being, irrespective of their background, their gender, their race, their ethnicity, their creed, is equal. And that's a really radical idea. And of course, we've probably got some alarms going off somewhere now that we've got Muslims who said the word radical. But this is an idea which, in essence, is so fundamentally simple, but is so extremely powerful, that even today, we see society can't manage to implement this. So I think in any discussion about women and men, that for me is the baseline by which we have to go back and look at everything. And so I think that means we need a reality check. Is the utopia that Islam promises in terms of every human being fulfilling their potential, both spiritually but also socially as part of the community, really being fulfilled? And for me, the answer to that is no. At the moment, we see that half of our community is not being given the opportunity to fully participate in society in the way that they want to. So if we talk about the war over Muslim women, the kind of outcomes that I see right now for this lack of voice for Muslim women is that, where is the self-determination that a woman can choose how she wants to determine her life? How does she create her own identity? Where is her voice gone? If she wants to ask a question, not necessarily to challenge the system, but to understand it, to explore it, to improve it, how can she do that without creating some kind of repercussion on her own life? And then I think there are really day-to-day issues. How should a woman go about getting married, for example? What if she wants to work? If she wants to go to university, like all of you have done? If she wants to gain some kind of